Our world is in turmoil. From the bustling streets of overcrowded cities to the dwindling resources of a planet under stress, a palpable sense of unease hangs in the air. The signs are everywhere. Climate change wreaking havoc, economies teetering on the brink of collapse, and societies fractured by deep-seated divisions. News cycles are dominated by headlines of political instability, environmental disasters, and social unrest. Images of starving children, flooded cities, and war-torn landscapes flash across our screens, painting a grim picture of a world spiraling towards chaos. But what if this chaos is not a coincidence? What if these seemingly disparate events are in fact interconnected pieces of a much larger and more sinister puzzle? A puzzle meticulously crafted by a powerful few who view the current state of the world not as a crisis to be solved, but as an opportunity to be exploited. This is not a conspiracy theory confined to the fringes of the internet. This is a chilling reality that is rapidly unfolding before our very eyes. For decades, a shadowy cabal of global elites has been operating behind the scenes, their influence extending far beyond the boardrooms of multinational corporations and the halls of government. Their objective? To reshape the world in their image, even if it means sacrificing billions of lives.
In hushed tones and behind closed doors, a terrifying agenda is being discussed. A plan to cull the human population, reducing it to a fraction of its current size. This is about power, control, and the preservation of a way of life for a select few. These self-appointed guardians believe they alone have the right to decide who lives and who dies. They believe that by engineering a third world war, they can eliminate the surplus population.
The world today stands on a precipice teetering on the brink of a global conflagration. From the escalating tensions in the South China Sea to the simmering conflict in Eastern Europe, the seeds of war have been sown. These are not isolated incidents, they are orchestrated provocations. The puppet masters behind the scenes are masters of manipulation, exploiting our fears and prejudices to achieve their own twisted ends.
The plan is as audacious as it is horrifying. World War III, meticulously planned and ruthlessly executed, will serve as the catalyst for a global culling of unimaginable proportions. Billions will perish, not as casualties of war, but as sacrifices on the altar of a new world order. The survivors, a carefully selected few deemed worthy of life in this new world, will be left to pick up the pieces, their lives forever altered by the trauma of what they have witnessed. They will be told that the war was a necessary evil, a painful but essential step towards a brighter future. But this brighter future is a lie, a carefully constructed illusion designed to mask the true nature of the elite's agenda. The survivors will find themselves living in a world of constant surveillance and control, their every move monitored, their every thought scrutinized. This is the ultimate goal of the global elite, a world where the few rule over the many, where dissent is ruthlessly crushed, and where the very essence of what it means to be human is extinguished. This is the dystopian future that awaits us unless we find the courage to resist.
The seeds of the depopulation agenda were sown long ago, finding fertile ground in the theories of Thomas Robert Malthus. Malthus argued that population growth would outstrip resources, leading to famine and societal collapse. His ideas resonated with the anxieties of a rapidly industrializing world. Malthus's work justified social inequalities, suggesting poverty was a natural consequence of overpopulation. Today, echoes of Malthus's theories are heard in environmental and family planning discussions. The 20th century witnessed the rise of eugenics, a movement that took population control to a chilling extreme. Eugenicists sought to influence the human gene pool, promoting desirable traits and limiting those deemed unfit. Forced sterilizations and marriage restrictions were among the tools employed. The Holocaust exposed the true depravity of this ideology, shattering its scientific veneer. Though discredited, the legacy of eugenics continues to haunt us. Its echoes are still heard in debates about genetic engineering and reproductive rights. In the aftermath of World War II, overpopulation fears reemerged, driven by the baby boom and Cold War tensions. Concerns about resource scarcity and social unrest in developing nations led to renewed interest in population control. The 1960s and 1970s saw a surge in family planning programs backed by Western governments. Reproductive rights were often used to justify these programs, masking the agenda of limiting population growth. Coercive measures like forced sterilizations raised ethical questions. Critics argued these programs were driven by neo-colonialist agendas. Concerns remain about Western influence and cultural insensitivity in family planning.
Throughout history, powerful individuals and secretive organizations have shaped global events from the shadows. From the Knights Templar to the Illuminati, conspiracy theories weave narratives of secret societies and hidden agendas. While many claims are dubious, powerful networks operate beyond public scrutiny. Private meetings and backroom deals allow elites to shape policy and influence public opinion. The Bilderberg Group, Trilateral Commission, and World Economic Forum are examples of such gatherings.
In the murky world of conspiracy theories, few narratives are as chilling as Agenda 80, a purported plan by global elites to reduce the world's population by 80%. Proponents point to cryptic statements and population control initiatives as proof of a sinister plot. The Georgia Guidestones, a mysterious granite monument, are often cited as evidence. Inscribed on the stones is a guide to maintain humanity under 500 million. Critics dismiss Agenda 80 as a baseless conspiracy theory, arguing the evidence is misrepresented. Whether genuine or fabricated, it reflects anxiety about humanity's future amid global challenges.
Who are the architects of this audacious plan to reshape humanity? They are not figures shrouded in shadow. Their faces grace the covers of magazines, their names whispered in the corridors of power. These billionaires believe their wealth makes them immune to the rules. They are the tech moguls who see themselves as the vanguard of a new world order, where technology reigns supreme. They are the political dynasties, their lineage stretching back generations.
In the digital age, information is power, and no one understands this better than the tech titans who control the flow of data that shapes our perceptions and guides our actions. They are the architects of the algorithms that determine what we see, what we read, and what we believe. Their social media platforms have become the modern-day public square, where narratives are shaped, dissent is silenced, and the masses are swayed by carefully curated feeds of information. They have amassed unprecedented power, not through armies or elections, but through the insidious control of the very information we consume. Their reach extends far beyond the digital realm. They are investing heavily in biotechnology, artificial intelligence, and surveillance technologies, blurring the lines between the physical and digital worlds. Their ambition knows no bounds, their desire for control extending to the very fabric of human life. They speak of a future where technology liberates humanity from the constraints of disease, poverty, and even death itself. But beneath the utopian rhetoric lies a chilling reality, a world where human beings are increasingly subservient to the machines they have created, their lives micromanaged by algorithms, their thoughts and actions monitored by an omnipresent digital panopticon. Money is the lifeblood of power, and the financial elite control the global arteries of capital. They are the bankers, hedge fund managers, and private equity tycoons. Masters of leverage, they use debt to bend nations to their will. They profit from boom and bust cycles, consolidating power. Their tentacles reach into every corner of the globe, influencing policies and trade.
While the tech titans and financial elite may wield immense power, they cannot achieve their goals without the complicity of those who hold elected office. Enter the political puppets, presidents, prime ministers, and heads of state who have been compromised, co-opted, or simply convinced to advance the agenda of their puppet masters. Some are driven by ideology, seduced by the utopian promises of a world remade in the image of their benefactors. Others are motivated by greed, their pockets lined with campaign contributions and their bank accounts swollen with bribes. And still others are blackmailed, their darkest secrets held hostage, their careers and reputations hanging by a thread. They are the public face of the agenda, enacting policies, signing treaties, and waging wars that serve the interests of their hidden masters. They mouth platitudes about democracy, freedom, and the rule of law, all the while chipping away at the very foundations of these principles. They are the enablers, the facilitators, the useful idiots who lend an air of legitimacy to the agenda, convincing the masses that their best interests are being served, even as they are being led down a path to destruction.
Beyond the familiar faces of billionaires and politicians lie shadowy organizations hidden from public view, their influence felt globally. Think tanks, intelligence agencies, and secret societies operate in the shadows, shaping events behind the scenes, often at odds with government goals. Whisperers in the ears of power, architects of covert operations, manipulators of information, and orchestrators of chaos. Names like the Bilderberg Group, Trilateral Commission, and World Economic Forum evoke fear and fascination. Are they forums for discussing global issues or architects of a new world order? Critics allege they erode national sovereignty and suppress liberty. The truth likely lies somewhere in between.
The architects of war understand a fundamental truth. True power lies not in brute force, but in the ability to control the hearts and minds of the masses. To wage war on a global scale requires a carefully crafted narrative, a tapestry of fear, anger, and righteous indignation. The propaganda machine churns out misinformation to demonize enemies and stoke nationalism. Age-old rivalries are rekindled, and the seeds of hatred are sown deep within fear and uncertainty.
While the drums of war beat louder with each passing day, a more subtle but no less devastating conflict is already underway. A war waged not with bombs and bullets, but with sanctions, tariffs, and the manipulation of global financial markets. Nations deemed obstacles to the elite's agenda find themselves increasingly isolated, their economies crippled by carefully targeted sanctions, their access to global markets restricted, their currencies plummeting in value. The lifeblood of commerce is intentionally choked off, creating conditions of scarcity, hardship, and desperation. The goal is not outright conquest, at least not in the traditional sense. It is about bending nations to their will, forcing them to comply with the dictates of the New World Order. It is about creating a system of economic dependence where the levers of power are firmly in the hands of those who control the global financial system. The people, as always, are the ones who suffer most. The loss of livelihoods, the erosion of savings, the skyrocketing cost of basic necessities, these are the weapons of economic warfare, wielded with ruthless efficiency against those who dare to challenge the established order.
In the grand chess game of geopolitics, leaders are often mere pawns, expendable assets to be moved around the board, sacrificed when necessary to achieve a strategic advantage. The architects of the New World Order understand this well, and they have become masters at installing and removing leaders who serve their interests. Through a combination of covert operations, political assassinations, and carefully orchestrated color revolutions, they destabilize governments deemed unfriendly to their agenda, replacing them with regimes more amenable to their control. They fund and arm opposition groups, exploit existing social and political divisions, and manipulate public opinion through their vast media networks. The rise of populist strongmen, often portrayed as defenders of national sovereignty and traditional values, is no accident. These figures, while seemingly opposed to the globalist agenda, are often unwitting pawns in a much larger game, their rise to power facilitated by the very forces they claim to oppose. Their nationalism, often bordering on xenophobia, serves to further divide and polarize populations, making them more susceptible to manipulation and control. Their authoritarian tendencies, their disdain for democratic institutions and the rule of law, pave the way for a new era of tyranny, albeit one cloaked in the language of patriotism and national renewal.
In an age of information overload, where billions of data points compete for our attention, the ability to shape the narrative, to control what people see, hear, and believe, is more powerful than any army. The architects of the New World Order understand this well, and they have invested heavily in controlling the flow of information. The mainstream media, once a watchdog of democracy, has largely been co-opted, transformed into a mouthpiece for the powerful, its newsrooms filled with stenographers who dutifully parrot the official line, no matter how ludicrous or self-serving.
As the world teeters on the brink, the architects of chaos understand that sometimes a spark is needed to ignite the powder keg, a catalytic event to shatter the fragile peace and plunge the world into darkness. False flag operations, those carefully staged acts of deception designed to appear as if perpetrated by an enemy, have long been a tool of the unscrupulous, a way to manufacture a casus belli, a justification for war that would otherwise be unpalatable to the masses. Terrorist attacks, often attributed to shadowy groups with murky origins and even murkier funding sources, become the weapon of choice, their horrific consequences exploited to justify draconian security measures, erode civil liberties, and create a climate of fear and suspicion that makes rational thought impossible. The fog of war descends, obscuring the truth, making it impossible to discern friend from foe, reality from carefully constructed illusion. In such an environment where fear reigns supreme and reason is abandoned, the masses become willing participants in their own destruction, eagerly embracing the very forces that seek to enslave them.
The pieces are in place. The propaganda machine is working overtime, churning out a steady stream of fear and hatred. The global economy is teetering on the brink, crippled by sanctions and manipulated by unseen hands. Political leaders, whether through complicity, incompetence, or a toxic combination of both, seem powerless to stop the slide towards Armageddon. The world holds its breath, watching in horror as the doomsday clock ticks ever closer to midnight. The tension is palpable, a suffocating weight that hangs heavy in the air, a constant reminder that the unimaginable is no longer beyond the realm of possibility. In the corridors of power, behind closed doors, the architects of this madness watch with cold indifference, their plans nearing fruition, their endgame within reach. They have calculated the risks, weighed the costs, and deemed the sacrifice of billions an acceptable price to pay for the realization of their twisted vision. The world stands on a precipice, staring into the abyss. The countdown has begun. The only question that remains is, will humanity awaken from its slumber in time to avert disaster, or will it sleepwalk into the abyss, oblivious to its fate until it is too late?
The spark that ignited World War III remains shrouded in mystery. Was it a false flag operation, a calculated act of provocation, or a tragic miscalculation, a diplomatic blunder spiraling out of control? The incident, a border skirmish, quickly escalated, fueled by nationalism and fear. Accusations flew, each side blaming the other, claiming self-defense. Each side invoked existential threats to justify their actions. Within days, a localized conflict had metastasized into a global conflagration. The opening salvos of the war were swift, brutal, and decisive, showcasing the chilling efficiency of modern warfare. Missiles rained down on strategic targets, obliterating military installations and crippling critical infrastructure. Cities were transformed into smoldering ruins, their streets littered with rubble. The lucky ones died quickly, vaporized by thermobaric explosions. The less fortunate were left to die slowly, their cries for help drowned out by collapsing buildings. Entire nations were brought to their knees in days. Their governments toppled, economies crippled, and populations scattered. The initial shock of the attacks left the world reeling, struggling to comprehend the speed of civilization's unraveling. The old rules of engagement were revealed to be as flimsy as a spider's web in a hurricane.
While bombs wreaked havoc, a silent war raged in the digital realm. Cyber attacks crippled critical infrastructure, disrupting communication networks and shutting down power grids. Hospitals were plunged into darkness, their life-saving equipment rendered useless. Air traffic control systems went offline, grounding planes and stranding travelers. Financial markets crashed, erasing trillions of dollars in wealth. The internet became a weapon of mass disruption, a virtual battleground where truth and falsehood blurred. Propaganda and misinformation spread like wildfire, inflaming tensions and eroding trust. The digital and physical worlds became intertwined, each reinforcing the other in a deadly feedback loop. The collapse of infrastructure fueled panic and unrest, amplified in the digital realm, creating a cycle of chaos.
The war escalated into a web of shifting alliances and proxy wars, each side exploiting regional conflicts. Old grudges were resurrected, ethnic tensions exploited, transforming regions into battlegrounds. Nations were forced to choose sides, their allegiances determined by survival. The lines between combatants and civilians blurred as the war engulfed entire regions.
Amidst the geopolitical maneuvering, the human cost of the conflict was staggering. The lucky ones died quickly, victims of stray bombs or collapsing buildings. Others died slowly, their bodies ravaged by disease, their minds broken by trauma. Millions were displaced, driven from their homes, their lives upended. They became refugees in their own countries, huddled in makeshift camps. The lucky ones escaped across borders, seeking refuge in neighboring countries. They became symbols of a world gone mad, their suffering met with indifference or hostility. The human cost of the conflict was a testament to the indifference of the world.
The conflict took on a momentum of its own, reaching every corner of the globe. The original objectives were forgotten, lost in a maelstrom of violence and vengeance. The world watched in horror as the situation spiraled out of control. The voices of reason were drowned out by the roar of tanks and fighter jets. The war became a self-perpetuating machine, fueled by fear and anger. It was a monster of our own creation, a testament to our capacity for self-destruction.
Silence. A silence so profound it pressed down on the shattered remnants of the world. Gone was the cacophony of war, the roar of jets, the thunder of explosions. In their place, a haunting stillness, broken only by the whisper of wind through shattered buildings. The war was over, The victors surveyed their spoils, a world bled dry, its cities reduced to smouldering ruins. The air, thick with the stench of decay, hung heavy in the lungs. Gone were the familiar landmarks, the comforting routines. In their place, a brutal reality where survival was a daily struggle. The earth, wounded and scarred, bore the weight of billions of unburied dead. Mass graves scarred the landscape, grim reminders of the fragility of human life. The survivors emerged from their shelters, their faces etched with trauma. From the ashes of the old world, a new order arose, built on survival and control. The lines on the map were redrawn, old alliances shattered, new power structures forged. The nation-state lay in ruins, replaced by regional power blocks. Those who orchestrated the chaos emerged, ready to impose their will. They spoke of peace and unity, but their words rang hollow. The promises of a better future were met with skepticism. The survivors, hardened by the harsh realities, distrusted the new order. For the survivors, life was a constant struggle against hunger, disease, and exploitation. The infrastructure lay in ruins, shattered beyond repair. Food, water, and medicine were scarce, tightly controlled by those in power. Cities had become treacherous labyrinths, havens for criminals and scavengers. The rule of law had evaporated, replaced by a brutal code of survival. Those who once enjoyed technological comforts now faced a primitive existence. Every interaction was fraught with danger, every decision a gamble.
Even in the darkest times, the human spirit refused to be extinguished. Across the ravaged landscape, seeds of resistance began to sprout. They were a motley crew, former soldiers, tech-savvy hackers, ordinary citizens. Their acts of defiance were small at first, almost insignificant, but each act of resistance chipped away at the facade of invincibility. Each act of courage served as a beacon, reminding the oppressed that they were not alone.
The war was over, but the battle for humanity's soul had just begun. The road ahead would be long and arduous. The scars of the conflict would take generations to heal. The world the survivors inherited was a shadow of its former self. The task of rebuilding seemed insurmountable, but hope refused to be extinguished. The survivors clung to the belief that a better world was possible. The road ahead would be fraught with challenges and setbacks, but the human spirit was capable of extraordinary resilience. The future held the promise of renewal and a chance to build a more just world.
The architects of the New World Order underestimated humanity's spirit. They had underestimated the refusal to submit to tyranny. Across the ravaged landscape, seeds of rebellion began to sprout. Acts of defiance were small, like wildflowers pushing through cracks. A whispered word of dissent, a smuggled message of hope. Individuals found themselves thrust into extraordinary circumstances. They became reluctant warriors, driven by love for their families and communities. They understood their enemy was an insidious ideology, and so they fought back with the cunning of the desperate and the belief that the human spirit could not be extinguished. As the initial shock of the war subsided, survivors emerged from their shelters and began rebuilding their shattered lives. They discovered they were not alone. Resistance groups began to emerge, united by a common enemy. Communication was sporadic at first, but networks strengthened and isolated pockets coalesced into an organized force. Former soldiers brought tactical knowledge, while hackers waged a digital war against propaganda. Ordinary citizens, fueled by love for their families, provided the backbone of the resistance, risking their lives in acts of defiance. The resistance movement, though geographically dispersed and operating under constant threat, became a beacon of hope for the oppressed, a testament to the indomitable spirit of humanity that refused to be extinguished, even in the face of unimaginable darkness. Their struggle resonated far beyond the battlefield, inspiring acts of quiet defiance in the most unexpected of places. Within the regime's own ranks, cracks began to appear as individuals. Their consciences, awakened by the brutality they were ordered to inflict, began to question their loyalties. The world, which had watched in horror as civilization crumbled, began to take notice of the courageous struggle of the resistance. Whispers of support, of admiration for their unwavering spirit, began to filter back through the cracks in the regime's information blockade, providing a much-needed lifeline of encouragement to those fighting for a better future. The outcome of the conflict remained uncertain, the path ahead fraught with peril and sacrifice. But one thing was clear: the human spirit, though battered and bruised, was far from broken. The seeds of rebellion had been sown, and from those seeds, a new world, a world founded on the principles of freedom, justice, and the enduring power of the human spirit, would one day rise again.
The conflict, as all conflicts eventually do, reached a breaking point. The regime, its resources depleted, finally crumbled. Survivors emerged to reclaim their stolen futures. But victory was bittersweet. The world bore the indelible scars of conflict. Survivors faced the daunting task of rebuilding from the ashes. Amidst the ruins, something remarkable began to take root. Hope, that most tenacious of human emotions, refused to be extinguished. The survivors, tempered by hardship, clung to the belief that a better world was possible. From the ashes of destruction, something new and beautiful could emerge. They came together not along the old lines of nation or creed, but as fellow travelers on a shared journey of healing and renewal. They pooled their meager resources, sharing what little they had. They comforted the grieving, tended to the wounded, and offered words of encouragement to those who had lost all hope. Slowly, life began to return to the ravaged land. Gardens bloomed in the shadows of shattered buildings. Children's laughter echoed through the streets. The survivors began the long task of rebuilding not just their homes and communities, but the very fabric of civilization itself. The future remained uncertain, but a new spirit of cooperation and resilience was taking hold. A testament to the enduring power of the human spirit, the world they were creating held the promise of something better. A world where peace was not just the absence of war, but the active pursuit of justice and equality. Our shared humanity is our greatest strength and hope for the future.